Okay, did you all hear that? Probably you didn't back in the back. It's hard to hear here. Erica has a seventh grade student who's been in the hospital all last week with seizures and so forth, and they're going through a diagnosis process right now.
Yeah, they're trying to induce seizures and give her some kind of medication to see if she's a candidate for brain surgery.
So,
And it's just her and her mom. They've been through a lot. So I feel for her.
okay, we have no name, obviously. We can't share that right now, but if you can remember this seventh grade student and her mother that's going through a trial right now. Anybody else? Sonny?
My daughter Dee Dee, she's showing slight improvement. So we're just thrilled to death.
Yeah, just pray that she can continue to improve. Oh, yeah. Okay, if nobody else has one, let's take these requests to the Lord in prayer. And Bob, will you lead us?
Bow before you again, Lord. We're certainly grateful and thankful for this opportunity on this Lord's Day to come out and give you praise and to lift up the name of Jesus. We pray that our lesson might challenge our minds and our hearts, and Lord, that we might be about our Father's business and our witnessing, proclaiming your name. Look at our prayer requests. Father, we pray. Pray for the salvation of those especially that do not know you. Continue, Lord, to seek and call. Challenge us and use us to be an instrument of your call. Pray to Sunday school class now and church service to follow and seek your will in all things that we do. In Christ we pray.
Well, we're really getting a late start, and I have an hour's worth of material that I'm going to try to go through really fast. So let's really kind of bring our minds to concentration now about the Sunday school lesson. The title of our lesson today, if you turn to page 28 in your book, and you turn to Numbers chapter 13, that is where we're going to be taking the lesson today as we are kind of taking a hop, skip, and jump through the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy. So we weren't going to hit every issue. To this lesson it's simply faith over fear. And no, I haven't got that shirt yet, but I ordered it and it's supposed to come today. So, because I like that. The more I study, yeah, but you've probably all seen people wear sweatshirts or shirts that says faith over fear. And that's basically what our lesson's going to be about today. So you concentrate on that faith over fear as we look at it. We've gone through the book of Numbers. Page 29 in your book is going to give you a little bit of a background information. And I am just going to kind of read what I wrote down to give you a summary. The Israelites stood on the verge of inheriting the land that God had promised to Abraham many years earlier, and it's 500 plus years earlier. So we're talking centuries early. In Genesis 12, it records the covenant that God had made with Abraham. Among making him to your offspring, I will give this land. So this is So this is a covenant that God made with Abraham, and it is an unconditional covenant that God has promised that he was going to give the land to Israelites and they would occupy the land. Right now, in fact, in the last 2 weeks, I've had 2 phone calls, 2 requests to go over what some people are teaching now, and that has to do with should we support Israel. And I'm not going to go into all that because that's a whole new subject. But coming up now is the idea that since the Jews rejected God, which they did and crucified him, right? And they're still basically, they are still rejecting Jesus, okay? That no longer applies. That covenant's no longer true. And that's what's being taught and propagated through the circles now. But in my study of the Bible, when God makes a covenant, no matter how long it takes, God is not going to change his mind. And so this has to do with this Abrahamic covenant that God made. And you'll see it recorded in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, repeated again in 15, and repeated to every one of the patriarchs, not only Abraham, his son Isaac, and his son Jacob. So it's been repeated over and over again. But anyhow, we've got the children of Israel, now that they've exited Egypt, right, had been there for over 400 years. So over 500 years later now, the Israelites are now camped at a place called Kadesh Barnea. You're welcome to turn to your back of the book if you want to look where that is. Kadesh Barnea was actually an oasis between two deserts area. The desert of Paran and the desert of Zin. In that desert area, we found a little oasis that would support life and support crops and so forth. And that is the place that in our lesson today we are now finding the Israelites are camped in this little oasis called Kadesh Barnea. But this encampment became an oasis of decision. And that's what I want to get in your minds today. It's an oasis where they were camping out, but it ended up, it is a place, or what I called an oasis of decision, a place of decision. And that's what our lesson is about the decision that had to be made. And I think we could typify or really state that decision that they had to make on this oasis constituted faith over fear. Should I have faith to trust God, or should I give into the way things look and be fearful and say no to whatever? So that's kind of where our lesson is going to go today. And you'll find some information on that page 29. Real quickly, it's hard to pinpoint. If you look at your map in the back of the book, it's hard to pinpoint exactly the points that they traveled. We're talking today that we're talking about a travel of 12 chosen people. We call them the 12 spies. In the 13th chapter, which we're in, verse 1 says, "The Lord said to Moses, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites." Here's how. From each ancestral tribe, how many tribes were there? 12 tribes. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders. So we have, and then the next couple verses that are the next really 15 verses, I believe, that's not in your lesson is really just the names of each of those leaders from each of the 12 tribes. In other words, it's the names of the 12 spies that were sent. I am not familiar with any of the names other than the two, because the only two stand out in the Bible for the rest of the Bible, and they are Caleb and Joshua. So that's where we are in our lesson today. And it's real hard, like I said, it gets kind of confusing when you look at your map. And the reason is the cities have changed names over the centuries. Just for an example, if you look at the map of Israel or the land around Israel today, you see a lot of those names are now Muslims' names. They've rechanged the names of the cities, and that's what happened over the years. Even when Christ was here, the Sea of Galilee became the Sea of Tiberias, who was the king in Rome at that time. So names have changed, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint and to be exactly where these places are. But the location is really at the tip of the land of Canaan, or like about 40 miles south of Jerusalem, which we know today is that. Now, real quickly, the time and the climate, they're pretty sure that all this happened in late summer or early fall. They know how the rainfall came. And what did they bring, the spies bring back with them? Grapes. And that was the growing the time when the grapes would be ready to harvest, would be a late summer and early fall. So they believe that that is exactly the time that they were making that. That's not really even important for our lesson today, but when you read your context there, it will tell you a little bit about that. Well, Numbers 13:1 tells us literally that God commanded Moses to now send 12 men, chosen one from every tribe, and send them into this land to spy out the land, which is going to pick up where our lesson starts on page 30, and it's called The Task is Outlined. Well, the task is outlined, but it's outlined for how many spies? Come on, kids. Okay, thank you. 12 spies. So we're looking at this portion of Scripture to see what assignment they had. What was their task when they did that? So they were in probably the southernmost tip of Canaan, which received very little rainfall. Apart from the oases, it was not suitable for farming, but shepherds used it for flocks. This place where they were camping is very important because 500 years previously, Abraham and Sarah settled there. And if you know anything about the Old Testament review of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob too, they had this conflict almost constantly in their lives. And that was there was no water. And so they dug wells. They would dig wells. And one was called Jacob's Well. In fact, that is still in that area today. But they would dig these wells, and there was a lot of conflict, fighting back and forth over the wells. And that is actually how the name Beersheba got it, because at one occasion there was a conflict between him and another inhabitant of the land. And they made this treaty and this agreement that Abraham said, I dug the well. One time Isaac had to say, well, we dug the wells, or our family dug it. So there was always this conflict, this fighting over water and this wells that they had dug. So this is going to take place in that type of area. So it's new to them, but it has a history of their ancestors. Actually, Beersheba is going to be located about 45 miles south of Jerusalem and about 30 miles from the Mediterranean Sea. So we've got a picture there. Okay, let's read what their assignment was. What did Moses say that they needed to do? In other words, what were their tasks? And I think for sake of time, I'll read that today and you follow along with me. When Moses sent them out to scout out the land of Canaan, he told them, go up this way to the Negev. Then go up to the hill country. Now, the hill country is what I just told you about, Beersheba and Hebron, the hill country there that has that past of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob dwelling there. Now, this is their task. See what the land is like, and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. Is the land they live on good or bad? And are the cities they live in encampments or fortifications? Is the land fertile or unproductive? Are there trees in it or not? And then one word, be courageous. Bring back some fruit from the land. It was the season for the first ripe grapes. Okay, these are these. So what were they supposed to do? Well, in brief form, they figure out what the land was like, what people were living there. Are the people strong or are they weak? Are there just a few people or is it a lot of people living there? Is the actual land good to live on? Is it fertile or is it unproductive? Does it have trees on it? Are there cities? And are they fortified with walls? When Joshua went over and fought the battle of Jericho, what did the walls, were there walls? Yeah, because they came tumbling down, didn't they? So that's what they mean by this fortified cities there. And their word that he gave them for departure was what? Be courageous, be bold, and bring back produce. That was only the 2 commands that we have recorded to that. Now, I want you to real quickly look at the questions there on page 31. And it says, what do you imagine the spies were thinking while Moses explained the information he wanted them to bring back? What could have or what would have caused them fear or to be afraid?
Well, they're going to be looking around. They're not from around there, but people look at them, they're strangers, and they want to know a bunch of stuff about our neighborhood and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
We do the same thing now.
Yeah. Okay, they were going to an unknown territory. They themselves had never been there before, so everything's like new to them, and it's unknown. Do you ever fear unknown? That's where our fear stems from, doesn't it? The unknown. They didn't know what or who they would find, and so it was the unknown was a fear. We fear the unknown. We'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the back. Some of it is, we're going to talk a little bit about fear, and it's an emotion, and I believe it is a God-given emotion, but we have to know how to deal with it, and we're going to talk about that later. So there was really basically a lot to fear, right? Apprehensions arise. I wrote down a couple things. Actually, anytime you call a minister or a minister comes to a new church, there are apprehensions. What are the people like? Almost the same thing. Are they going to be friendly? Are they going to be outgoing? Are they going to be standoffish? Are they going to question everything I say? Or are they going to be eager to hear and to learn? And what is their response going to be to me? So I don't know that you ever considered that, but any God-given task, there are these natural apprehensions. Maybe you are asked to teach a class. No matter what it is, even if it's just children, you have this apprehension. Will they like me? Will they even listen to what I'm going to say? And can I bring myself down to a level to actually communicate with them so that they understand? So we have these different apprehensions. Someone who is even called to be up front, Terry, to give announcements. We may fear public speaking, right? So all these are apprehensions. So it's a real thing to have apprehension when God calls us to a task, particularly if it's an unknown task. New to me, new, different. And that could go so much, it could go into so many areas here. So fear is something that I believe is God-given, but we're going to have to learn to deal with it. So how do we approach a God-given task? We're going to find out that, number one, we need to be informed what is expected from us. And that's exactly what that task did. They were informed what did God expect them to find out. And then secondly, I believe that it is that we should confirm, first of all, that God has sent us. Now, with the information that God gives us, He calls us to a task, and we've searched out the information of what that job or that task requires. We have asked God for a confirmation that I am the one that you're calling to do this job. There is still some apprehensions, not fears, but apprehensions that can arise. Do you know what any of them would be?
I don't know if it pertains to them, but my biggest fear is fear of failure.
Failure, yes. Well, I put down 3. For lack of time, I'm going to read, do I have enough energy and strength to do that? That was one I had. Or number 2, do I have enough wisdom or knowledge that task is going to require? And thirdly, I put down, do I have enough time without slighting other commitments. So there are some apprehensions that we all have even when we approach this job. Okay, let's real quickly go on to the land assessed there, page 31. And as far as Rehob, near the entrance of Hamath, and they went up to the Negev and to Hebron. Now, where there's a lot of descendants' names are here, and I'm not even going to try. I did look them up and wrote down how they were spelled out, but they were descendants of a people called Anak. Now, real quickly, because your book will tell you a little bit who these descendants of Anak were. Real quickly, the Anak was known also as the Anakim, which means in itself some very strong-necked, tall people. Okay, that's what the word Anak meant. Actually, they're mentioned 14 times in the Old Testament. So they are a race of a giant-sized people related to the Nephilim of Genesis 6:4. Now, I am not going to go into that. I'd love to go into that with you. Genesis 6:4 says that the angels of God came down and married the daughters of men, and from them was produced a giant population. And there's a big descent here. In fact, my husband, when he was in a church at Norfolk, when he was in the Navy, the church divided over whether they were angels, demonic angels that came down and married women, or whether they were just the godly race from Noah that married. So I'm not even going to get there. But this is descendants from this race of people. Now let me tell you this. They were a fearsome people. They were large built, tall in stature. Some people suggest, and I'm inclined to believe, that Goliath, who was called the Philistine, was a descendant of this Anakim. Because, you know how tall he was? 9 foot 9 inches tall. So he was quite tall, and probably a descendant of that. So these people are now, we got to verse 22, and they ran into the descendants of Anak. So they ran into people that were very high, very strong, very persuasive, probably very ruling because of their size, and very intimidating because of their size. So there's the first people that these are going to run into and find. They not only encountered a race of people that were superior in stature, they were mighty in battle, and they were very well equipped and trained. Now, you can almost picture the 12 spies, right? The 12 men that had left Egypt were slaves, and now they're running into this. So let's see, it says, I'm going to keep on reading here. They said that people of Anak were living there, and in just a little thing that really doesn't mean much to us was Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. So it makes the location of where all this happened, it gives us the location. When they came to the Eshcol Valley, they cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes, which was carried on a pole by 2 men. They also took some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Eshcol Valley because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut there. And at the end of 40 days, they returned from scouting the land. So this is a short diary, very self-explanatory. One thing I did want to add, and I don't know, this is another study that goes very deep into the Bible. And I don't know if you've ever done it or not, but there's a study called numerology. Numerology seems to be, there are certain numbers in the Bible that seems to be repeated over and over again. And these people, at the end of 40 days, returned. 40 has sort of taken on the like a time of testing or a time of trial. Jesus was tempted for 40 days and 40 nights. Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. The flood, it rained 40 days and 40 nights. There was 40 years of wandering. There was a fast that was going to be for 40 days. And believe it or not, Goliath taunted Israel for 40 days. So there seems to be, and this is just a couple of those occasions, there's much more, and it's a deep study when you want to go into it. Obviously, you know a little bit about the number 3, don't you? Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights. Jesus was in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. So another number that seems to be repeated over and over again is that number 3. Obviously, anybody who's read the book of Revelation, what's the number that's repeated over and over again? It's even called the book of sevens. So you're going to find that's repeated over and again. That's just a little bit, it's really a deep Bible study, but maybe you want to kind of do that. Well, the application that we get from that little bit of reading is actually obedience to God includes understanding what he's calling us to do. So they went, the spies searched out the land, right? And they got a very good understanding of what they were going to be up against. So that's important too. We need to understand what the task involves so we can evaluate our task that God gives to us and we can prepare for it. Well, now that they have an understanding of what that land is like, the next section of the lesson is called the decision. The decision. So when we have an understanding too, after we understand, then it is up to us because God never makes us take a task. He just isn't. He will give us a task. We can get an understanding of what that task is, and then we have the choice. We have the decision. No, God, I'm not going to do it. Or yes, God, I will do it. And place my faith over all my fears and place my faith in you, and I will do it as you lead me and as you give me faith. Is that what the children of Israel did? Because they had all these facts now that we have. Well, the decision at hand, now the spies, your book will tell you, is about 251 way. So they made like a 500-mile trip, going and coming, in 40 days and 40 nights, is what they did. Now they came back home, and now they're going to give this report. And this report is going to require a decision. The decision is, do we go into the land that God is going to give us and conquer the land, or do we not? Do we give into fear? Do we give into the fact that the cities are fortified? Do we give into the fact that there are big people here? So here's the report, and the decision's called for. First, page 33, the men went back to Moses, Aaron, and the entire Israelite community in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back a report for them and the whole community, and they showed them the fruit of the land. They reported to Moses, here's what they reported. It's in quotes, right? We went into the land where you sent us. Indeed, it is flowing with milk and honey. And here's some of the fruit. However, the people living in the land are strong, and the cities are large and fortified. And we saw the descendants of Anak there. And the Amalekites are living in the land of the Nevgah. And the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites live in the hill country. And the Canaanites live by the sea along the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people in the presence of Moses and said, let's go up now and take possession of the land, because we can certainly conquer it. But the men who had gone up with him responded, we can't attack the people because they are stronger than we are. If we keep on reading, even in verse 30 and 32, which is not in our scripture, in verse that will say, they spread a bad report among the Israelites about the land they explored, saying, we seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. So that is how they said. We've got decisions here. We've got reports, right? We've got a good report and we've got a bad report. The good report says, we went where you sent us. It's indeed a great land. It's land flowing with milk and honey, and here's the fruit that we brought back. But then the bad report says simply this: the people are strong. And the cities, they're well fortified. We saw descendants of the Anak there. And the land is occupied with the Anaks and the Amalekites and the Hethezites and the Jebusites, the Amorites and the Canaanites. Basically, they are a descendant of Esau. For the most part of those people. When Esau and Jacob separated ways and Jacob became the patriarch, Esau went and occupied those lands, and some of these people are the descendants from that. So the decision is a split decision, right? It's a split decision. So number one, Caleb quieted the people and he said, let's now go up and take possessions of the land because we can certainly conquer it. And the other 10 says we can't. So they spread this bad report, a negative report that resulted in fear overwhelming faith in God. Fear was elevated over faith in God. Here's what it also says. It says, that night the people raised their voices and they wept and they grumbled against Moses and Aaron. Next week we're going to find out in our lesson what was the result of all this grumbling and this negative report that they all as a body unified and gave into, and only a handful of people said, yes, we can conquer because God has commanded us to go and do this, and we can conquer it step by step as God gives us the energy, the faith, and the victory there. So, I'm going to ask you this question in closing of our lesson today. What kind of obstacles might prevent us from obeying God? Now we're talking about actual obstacles here. What kind of obstacles could prevent you from obeying God? Fear? Well, yeah. Okay, let me give you what I put down. I'll give you the track that I'm going on here. There may be a lack of physical need. Your lack of your body, you're not strong enough, or lack of even supplies. Physically, I am not able to accomplish this task. Okay, that could be one. Could be lack of money. I thought even when we built this activity building, and most of you here weren't here for that, but we really didn't have funds to do that. A couple of you guys can attest to that. And we had a need because we outgrew the church sanctuary and we outgrew the basement Sunday school rooms. At that point, I had 35 people in the office. So you can imagine, once you got into your place, you never left. You were there until we filed out single file. But we had a need for this, but we did not have the funds. And but we stepped out in faith, literally, and accomplished this task that this activity was built on, and then later all the Sunday school rooms in the back. But that's just one thing. That could have stopped us from doing what God wanted us to do because we didn't have the physical needs. We didn't have the money to do. And another one is sometimes we don't even have laborers to help us. And that's a hard one. How am I going to do that by myself, right? I don't have anybody help. And so we give into the fear and maybe say no because we don't have the help for that. Well, let me just close with this, what I wrote down. and I'm not no psychologist, so some of this might not be 100% true. I don't know. You can analyze it. But I wrote down fear is a powerful, God-given emotion. Now, what do I mean by that? Suppose I'm out hiking Seneca Rocks, okay, and I get real, real close to where it's straight down. What do? I fear. I fear, and that fear keeps me from taking another step, doesn't it? So fear is something that God will give us. What we actually saw in the last couple months on our nation was rivers that started to rage out of their banks, and it produced fear in people to back off or to get to higher land. So fear is a good thing. And I wrote down, fear is also real. It's a real thing. So don't think because you have fear that you have sinned, because fear is a God-given emotion. But, listen to this, but sometimes it gives way to false conclusions. You know what I mean by that? How many here were afraid of the dark because there's a monster in the house when you were little? And that fear was a false conclusion. There was no monster. I remember when our kids were little, my nephew, some might know Brian McDonald, when he was over at our house, which we were living in a farmhouse now, he was scared to death to walk over this little bridge that just is a little creek because there was a troll under there. And so his mother had to come with a flashlight and walk him over the bridge, and we still tease him about that because he was afraid of that. Now that is a fear, a real fear, but it gives way to a false conclusion, doesn't it? There was no troll under the bridge, but it was fearful for him. Just like that monster in the house, or someone breaking into your house. If you hear a noise, you're just so sure and so fearful that something's there. So we can't always depend on fear to dictate our lives, can we? We can't do that. So it sometimes tricks us. But we can depend on God when we place our fears into God, or we place our fear and give way over to the faith in God. I don't know how many of you listened to Caleb, and this has been like some time ago. Zach Williams came out with a song, and it was called "Fear is a Liar." And that is a really good song to listen to about that. Fear's a liar. It's a lie, and it's a thing that Satan brings into believers' life over and over and over again to fear different things, a variety of things. But we do not have to give way to the fear, even though the circumstances look nasty and they may even look fear. There's so many verses in the Bible, actually, about fear, but I only picked 3 to leave you with. In Psalm 23:4, you know what Psalm chapter 23 is? It's the Good Shepherd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Verse 4 says, I will fear no evil because you are with me. So there's one that's very plain and simple. Psalm 34 verses 4 and 5, it says, I sought the Lord, and he delivered me from all my fears. That is faith over fear. Psalm 56:3 says, whenever I am afraid, I will put my trust in you. And John 14:27, a New Testament scripture. Peace, this is Jesus' last words to us. Chapter 14 was spoken when Jesus was on his way to the garden, or in the Garden of Gethsemane right before his crucifixion. And he said, peace I leave with you. My peace I'm going to give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. So the scripture is full of places where, you know, every patriarch, every person in the Bible, and I could start naming them. Right away I thought of Gideon. Gideon was called to conquer the Philistines, the area around that were raging in on them, destroying their crops. And he says, "Oh, I can't do this, God. I'm just a man. I'm just a man." And God says to them, "Don't be afraid. I will be with you." And he had to learn to place his fear underneath the faith that God gives. Everyone, look about David and the people that feared Goliath, and we could just start numbering. Everyone that God called, first of all, had a fear that they had to conquer and give to God. And now I'm going to wear my t-shirt when it comes today, faith over fear. And I hope you can too. Thank you.
When you read the first couple of verses, it said you're going to send a man from each tribe, and they're leaders of their tribe. And I thought, if there's leaders of each tribe, then they've kind of been elected, so they're politicians. So for two of them to go back, that's pretty